time for Nerdgasm.
Hey, what's up, Nerdgasm fans? Jerry here, aka Barnacules. Now, I think it's about damn time we get back to some 3D printing videos, because I know you guys really love those. So I went back and did a little research on my past videos to figure out what 3D prints are most popular with you guys. And it turns out that one 3D print stands out amongst the rest, and that would be this guy right here. This is a 3-stage planetary reduction gearbox that I printed. It's one of my earlier videos, and I printed it on the Ultimaker original 3D printer, and it demonstrates that you can 3D print a whole bunch of little gears and parts and connecting pieces and actually generate something that's highly mechanical. I mean, there are a lot of things going on in this little guy. And I went through the comments of that video, and a lot of you guys really specifically like the mechanical nature of the 3D print. So now I'm gonna give you another mechanical 3D print. The one that I selected for this video is actually a hand crank cooling fan that was actually designed by one of my favorite 3D designers over at MyMiniFactory.com, and that would be Mr. Kirby Downey. Now this guy is an amazing designer. He does a lot of prop 3D models. Like for instance, if you guys didn't watch the video on this is the Duke Mark 44 hand cannon from Destiny, and Kirby Downey 3D modeled this, and I printed it, and I love it. I mean, it actually has moving parts. You can pull the cylinder out, you can pull the ammunition out of it and put it back into it. It's an excellent demonstration of how you can not only model something, but slice it so that it can be printed on a desktop 3D printer and actually come out good. So I'm really excited to 3D print this fan. And also one more thing before we get started, guys, I want to announce I recently partnered with MyMiniFactory.com on a project. Now basically, I'm gonna send them 200 pictures of my sexy body wearing some really tight material. And they're gonna 3D model my body, and then when they're done 3D modeling my body, they're gonna 3D model an Episode 7 Star Wars Stormtrooper suit over my body, slice it up into pieces that can be printed on desktop 3D printers. And I'm gonna do an entire video series, start to scratch, on that process, ending with me going to PAX Prime 2015 wearing that suit. So you guys, if you're into Star Wars, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You guys are really gonna like that. But for this video, let's go ahead and print out this hand crank fan and see how she works.
Or else Barnacules gets it.
All right, you nerds, the first thing we need to kick off this project is we need the 3D model, because we're not printing anything without a 3D model. So I headed over to MyMiniFactory.com, which you see here, and I'm specifically on Kirby Downey's personal page showing all of his 3D models. Now, if we scroll down the page, you can see this guy has created a lot of models. I think it's safe to say this guy eats, breathes, and shits in polygons. I mean, that's probably true. You could probably go ask him on Twitter and get back to me on that. But he makes some crazy stuff, like all these guns from Destiny. You can see there's the Duke Mark 44 that I already 3D printed and talked about in the intro to this video. But for this particular video, we're going to be 3D printing this hand crank mechanical fan. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and that brings up the item page. And you can see down here, it tells you cool stuff, stats about how long it took him to 3D model it, how much material it takes to print. He even gives some information down here how to print the model. He used 0.15 millimeter with a 15% infill, and he also included an album of images telling you how to assemble it. Thank you so much, Kirby. It's so hard to assemble these things sometimes when nobody gives you instructions. So we're gonna go ahead and just click the free download button, and you can see I already downloaded it previously, and I just wasted some bandwidth downloading it again. All right, guys, so now we got our 3D model, so we have to move over to our slicer software. Here I'm using Cura 15.02 by Ultimaker. It's their open source slicing software that works with all G-code enabled printers. It's actually my preferred slicer. So I'm gonna come over here, and I've got the archive I downloaded from MyMiniFactory, and it contains 12 separate 3D models that make up this fan. And one of them you have to print twice, so it's technically 13 parts making up this project. And just like Kirby said on his site, if you click the instructions folder, you got step-by-step pictures detailing how to assemble this thing. That's great, Kirby. A lot of people don't include that. So if we come over here and we grab all 12 of these files and we drag them over to the build platform in Cura, it's going to go ahead and slice them. And you see we already have a problem. See the gray pieces? These don't fit on the build platform, so we can't print this all at once. So we're going to have to break it up into a couple of different prints. So let me go ahead and clear the platform. And we're going to start off by printing the two largest things. We're going to take the casing file right here and the casing gears, and we'll move those over on the platform. Those are the two biggest, most central parts of this project. But we still run into a problem, and that is this is gray because it doesn't fit on the build platform. So we're going to come down here and just simply rotate it a couple of clicks. and now it fits. And then we run into a problem with this, and that is when we load the part, you notice it's oriented where if we print it this way, it needs a ton of support material in between these two guys right here, and it needs a lot of support material over here also. So that's a waste of support material, and it's going to be a long cleanup. So what I think we should do instead is just simply rotate this part on its side. Now when we print this part, what's going to happen is you're just going to have a little overhang at the top of the circles. Everything else is going to print perfectly with no support. And then I think these little nubs are so short that it's not really going to matter. I don't think they're going to need support either. One other thing I'm going to change really quick is I'm going to go up to tools and I'm going to go to print one at a time. Now what this setting does is it actually changes how the printer approaches printing this. What it would normally do is it would print a layer, move over, print that same layer, go up one, keep going back and forth until both items were printed. Well, by changing this mode, what it's done, if I come over to the layers view, is you can see it's going to print one item first, and then it's going to print the second item. And the cool thing is you get a lot higher print quality when you do this, because when it has to pick up the print head on each and every single one of the layers, it usually deposits like a little plastic booger or a little defect where it starts printing again. And it's just more that you have to clean up. So it's just, you're better off if you can do it this way. All right, so printing out this model, we're actually going to use a 0.2 millimeter layer height. We're going to do a fill density of 20%. So we're changing things up a little bit and trying to make it stronger than Kirby's attempt. And we're going to print at 50 millimeters a second, which is just the default setting for the Ultimaker 2. And the material we're going to be using is called colorFabb XT, and it has a melting point of about 240 to 260 C. So we're just going to sit right in the middle at 250 for this print. Now, once that first print is completed, we're going to have to print the remaining parts. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the last 10 parts over here to the build platform. And you can see they don't fit very well, and that's because we have it set up to print one at a time. This time, we're going to go ahead and compromise and say print all at once. Now, the biggest problem that we're going to run into here again is that the pieces are oriented incorrectly. So you basically have to take these gears, like this guy right here, and you're going to want to rotate it around 180 degrees. You're going to want to do the same thing with this guy right here. You're going to want to take this cog and rotate it around 180 degrees. Same thing with the washer right here. Let's go ahead and grab the little washer. And we're going to rotate that around because you want these to lay flat, because that way they don't need any support material to print. They'll print much faster and much cleaner. Now, I have a little experience because I've already printed a couple of these out, playing around with different orientations, so I could give you guys like really good information in the video. And that's how I discovered these new settings that I'm using. Like, for instance, these little end caps, I lay them on their side and I go ahead and enable support material for touching build plate. That way it just puts a little bit of support material around the rim, but it keeps this hex hole very, very clean, which is what you want. Now, I played around with the handle a little bit, and I found the best way to print the handle for this particular model, at least for me, was to rotate it up on its end so that the hex nut is facing down like this. That way you just get a little support material underneath here, but it keeps the hex hole very clean. And that's what you want to ultimately do, is you want the connecting parts to fit together well. And the same thing with this. I found that printing it on its side, the support material is really hard to clean away, and the cone wasn't very uniform. So instead I print it up and down, and it basically builds a little support tower underneath it, but it comes out much cleaner. All right, guys. Well, now we've got all of our parts all set. Let's get them printed out on the 3D printer and start assembly. All right, guys, so here we have all the 3D printed parts that we need to assemble this thing. Now, you might notice after the time lapse that a couple of the pieces are blue. Now, what happened was I had some problems 3D printing this, because when I first started, I was using a 15% infill on the parts, and this is what I ended up with. Is I got these little cogs and gears, but you can see they weren't strong enough. I actually broke a pin off of this cog right here. And had some other problems with the handle cracking because it just wasn't, it was too brittle at 15% infill. So I took all the 15% infill parts that were a part of the mechanical systems, and changed them out with 100% infill, and I figured while I was doing it, I'd do it as a different color. That way I could tell which parts were 100% and which parts weren't. So I printed out all of the parts that have tension on them. Like, for instance, the hand crank has a lot of tension on it. This piece, the spline that turns the fan, has a lot of tension on it. I don't really know why I have 2 hand cranks, but we'll figure that out later. I also have 2 little cogs right here that are 100% infill, and then the 2 big cogs that are 100% infill. Now, all of the white pieces here are printed in colorFabb XT material, which is amazing. It's a very high melting point material that you can use that's much like ABS, and it's very strong compared to just PLA. Now, these blue pieces here are printed with Ultimaker PLA, which has a way lower melting point, but I figured this isn't going to be exposed to any drastic amounts of heat, and I'm not printing it in black, so I figure it'll be fine. Now, another problem I ran into printing the fan was, you notice some of these little pieces on the back here broke. And I can just re-glue them, that's not a problem, but just when Kirby made the model, he made these incredibly thin and delicate. So if it was printed in ABS, I don't think it'd be a problem because there'd be more flex to it, but while I was torquing on it, doing the test assembly of the fan, I actually did break those. So we're going to go ahead and glue those during the final assembly. Alright, to put this bad boy together, you start out with this guy, obviously, but we want to take the fan blades, and you want to put a washer. You 3D print this little washer right here. You want to make sure you get it in there, because if you don't put the washer in there, you get too much friction, and it doesn't turn. So now that we've got the washer in there, we're going to go ahead and put the spline through. That's this little blue guy right here in the nose cone. So one thing I noticed when I first assembled this was things didn't fit together quite right, and it's because Kirby modeled this to very, very tight tolerances. So what I recommend is get yourself some tools. Like, I use these little files right here that I just picked up. They're HDX files. I got them from Harbor Freight, I believe, or Home Depot, or one of those places. And I also pick up a pair of pliers, and I was just using some random thing here as a punch to separate parts. So what I generally do is I get a couple of files that are different shapes, and when parts don't fit well together, I just take the file, and I just run it down, and clean up the edges, and get some of the debris and some of the little boogers that sometimes happen during 3D printing, clean those out. And then I'll do the same thing for parts like this, where I printed it and it had support material on it. You can see where the support material connected to the center of the shaft. I use a flat file and I clean that up. Now, I already cleaned these pieces up a little bit. I could be a little bit more meticulous, but you can tell like where the support material was under that little guy in particular. It's pretty rough, so you want to clean that up. Alright, it's time to assemble this bad boy. So what you want to do is take your fan blade here, your little impeller, and then you want to take this little washer and put it on the back side of it, because you definitely need the washer. If you don't, you get too much friction. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the spline through on the front here. It doesn't really matter which way you put the fan on, because either way you can just spin the handle opposite direction and get the same effect. So now we've got the blade, we've got the spline on. Now we're going to go ahead and put it in through the back of this. So, and then we got to grab this little cog here. It's the one that has a little lip on the top of it, and that's actually the bushing that holds everything straight. So once you push all those parts together, and it may take a little force, there we go. So that bushing now keeps the fan blade centered as it's turning so it doesn't hit the housing. And you can see it spins nice and free. That is a really, really good sign. Alright, so now that that piece is assembled, we're going to take this. This is the gearbox right here. This is where all the magic happens. Now, I 3D printed 2 gears here. You can see one has a shaft that's slightly longer than the other one. So we want to take the one with the really long shaft. I know that sounds wildly inappropriate, but just trust me on this one. And see, it goes up through the little center hole there. Now, there's another cog that you need to line up with it. So you basically put this cog in between like this. I usually just get it lined up using a file or a little pick or something like that. Then you just want to put this guy up through the bottom. And now you can see those 2 pieces connect up through there. And then I 3D printed these little cap pieces. And these little cap pieces just act as bushings and hold it in place. So we're going to go ahead and push one of those on. But the problem that I noticed with this is if you spin it, the cap will eventually fall off. It doesn't hold on very well. So we're going to actually glue a lot of this when we're done assembling it. So go ahead and put that cap on. So now that piece, notice it doesn't move it around. It just spins on its little axis. That's perfect. Now we want to take the other big cog, and these 2 pieces separate. They bend. Don't bend them too far because they will break. So let's go ahead and put that in there. And now you can see all of the gears mesh together. And then if you look at the little 3D handle printed, and this is a good example, you see how rough it is on the bottom here? That's from all the support material. If I was to sand and use a file and everything, I could clean all that up and make it look really, really nice. But since it's not really a visible part, I'm not too concerned with it. One part you are going to want to do, though, is clean up around the edges of these connecting pieces, because this little lip right here acts as the bushing that keeps everything centered. And if it's rough, it won't spin very smoothly. So take your time when cleaning these things up, guys. So now at this point, if we did everything right, we have a functioning gearbox. You can see the little gears turning in there, right? So if I turn it, though, that little cap will eventually fall off. So again, we're going to glue that and a couple other things. So now the final thing is you take the gearbox, and there's little notches that are in the 3D printed model that hold the gearbox in place. Again, you're going to want to glue it. But let's go ahead and pop it into place just to make sure it works. And now if you look in the back here, you can see all of those gears line up from the handle, the big gear, to the little gear, to the second big gear, and then the second little gear on there. And then the only thing left to do is take the final cap and put it over the little drive shaft. And as you can see, the cap does not want to grip on there very well. Let me try one of my blue caps. I actually printed it with a little bit thicker Z-axis so it'd go further down in the hole. And it actually looks like that holds much better. So let's go ahead and replace those. I'm going to take the white ones off. All I did for these, Kirby, if you're watching, is I just extended the Z-axis by like an extra like 0.5 millimeter, just to make them a little thicker so that they went down on the shaft just a little bit more.
I swear you can't say shaft without sounding dirty.
Now, as you can see, when I turn the fan, the handle turns. That is a good sign. That means all the gears are meshing. So now let's see if we can turn the handle and turn the fan. And see, it's binding a little bit. See, and it's kind of falling apart because it's not glued. Let's go ahead and just get it to where it'll actually turn. You do kind of want the gears to be a little bit loose fitting, because if they're not, they do bind. So look at that. The fan is turning. Go the other direction. Okay, so that's our assembled fan right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the hot glue gun and fix a lot of this stuff, and we're going to glue the back down to the rig, and we're also going to do some gluing in here just to make this thing completely solid and function as expected. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to glue is I'm going to fix the fan shroud where all the blades broke. Now the cool thing about printing in the colorFabb XT material is it has a much higher melting point, so using hot glue with it actually is easy to do. Now with the PLA, you tend to have a little bit of melting problem because the PLA has such a low melting point. But if you just use a little dab, it'll be fine. So let's go ahead and just dab the back of these guys. Alright, well, it might not look super pretty, but I've got everything all glued into place. So now my grill isn't going anywhere. Alright, now that that's done, let's go ahead and focus on the gearbox. So let me go ahead and reassemble my gearbox here. And then we want to glue the cap on. Now you want to be careful because you don't want to glue it to the structure, otherwise the gear won't spin. So let's go ahead and just put a tiny, tiny little dab of glue. Okay, that was probably a little bit more than tiny. Alright, well I made the mistake and used too much glue, and it actually welded the gear in place, so now I gotta break that free. Alright, so now I got a little hot glue on the outside of that hole, which is gonna drag on that gear, so I need to clean that out. So I'm just gonna use my file and scrape. A lot of glue got up under the edge too, so you just want to make sure you get all that out. Basically, don't make this mistake. I show you the mistake so you guys don't have to make it. Now, I kind of wish I had super glue, because I think super glue would be much better suited to this, because the hot glue, there's just so much of it. Let's go ahead and make sure the cap and hood still fit together. And turn. They do. Alright, this time I'm just going to put a tiny, tiny little dab on top of the gear. Like super tiny. There we go. The problem with hot glue is you have to move pretty quick because it solidifies very quickly. Alright, that's much better. I'm going to go ahead and turn that. And I'm going to keep turning it until it sets, just to make sure if there is any glue in there, it doesn't set up and grab the wall. See, as long as that's turning, we're good up there at the top. See the cap's turning? That's good. You can see the gearbox turns. It gets looser as you turn it more because it basically is wearing the gears in. Now, I'm not going to glue the handle because the handle actually seems like it snaps on there pretty good. So we're only going to glue the parts that we really need to. So now that I know that the gearbox is actually functioning, as it should, I'm going to go ahead and glue this back edge here so that it can't lift. Alright, so now the back of the gearbox is glued in place. So you can see everything's working. And it's not coming apart on me. The cap's not flying off. And it's turning very, very smoothly now, which is good. But we'll even lubricate it later and see if it makes it work better. Alright, so now we need to do the same thing with the fan mechanism, now that everything's dried and the little splines aren't pushing out anymore. In case you guys didn't notice, these videos are completely unrehearsed and I don't script them or anything, so you guys see things as I see them. All I did before shooting this was do a basic fan assembly just to make sure I had all the parts and it worked, and that's when I discovered all the broken parts and I reprinted the blue ones. But this is the first time I've assembled this whole thing. Alright, so now it's time to assemble the fan. So just like before, let's go ahead and find our little nose cone. Here it is. Dun 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 dun! Alright, we're going to stick that down through the center. Again, guys, you might have to clean that up, maybe even use a dead blow hammer and tap it into place. But it should go right through. There we go, we got a blade. It's actually, even a 3D printed propeller is actually pretty well balanced. I might try to 3D print some quadcopter blades at some point. Let me know if you guys would be interested in seeing that. Okay, so now we have to add the washer. Do not forget that washer. Then put it through the back. Then put our little bushing on it, little blue guy right here. And now you can see that spins very, very free. That's exactly what we want. We want that thing to spin super, super free. If it's not, you're going to have trouble. Since it is a step-up gear, you basically, for every revolution of the handle, you're turning this thing several times. So you want everything smooth as silk. Okay, let's go ahead and apply the gearbox. There's little notches that it just goes right into. And there it is. We can see everything's turning. You want to make sure everything turns before you do the final gluing here. Everything's turning good. Alright, we'll see if we can get that to attach later. The last thing I'm going to do is, now that we know the gearbox is working, you can see down here where everything is attached in the little notches. Everything lines up. He modeled it to be just like that. So everything's attached. Now we're going to go ahead and just do the final gluing. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the base right here. I'm just basically going to run a string of glue across the bottom. Okay, that's gripping pretty good. Let's go ahead and spin it around. Now we're just going to glue the front. Make sure you don't get any glue down on the fan blades, otherwise this whole thing will just stop working. Whew! I literally just ran out of glue. Alright guys, well I finished, and I've made quite a few mistakes on this, yet we still got to the end result. For one, if you look at the gears inside, I actually did get some hot glue on them, and I could use a little dental pick or something and get it all off of those gears, but it's working, so I'm not going to do that. But I did learn a lesson. Be really careful with the hot glue. I got really impatient and gobbed it on and didn't wait for it to set up, and it was dripping into places it shouldn't have been, and it caused big problems. But as you guys can see, the fan does work. Like this. You can even crank it as fast as you can, and you do definitely feel a breeze. Now, when you do turn it and you point at your face like this, you do get a gentle breeze, but it's not really effective. I mean, to be honest, you probably wave more air at yourself with your hand. And the other thing I noticed, when you turn it backwards, it tends to bind up. Because what happens is, the blades catch the air and they flex a little bit. And as soon as they flex from the pressure of the air, they grab onto the little splines, and it stops them from spinning. Like if you go really slow, it works fine. But as soon as you try to go fast, it just binds up instantly. But this direction, you can see all the gears are working. Everything's all glued together, so it's not coming apart. Alright guys, so the last thing I'm going to do to improve on this is it does actually spin pretty free, but it does bind a gear every once in a while. And you do feel a little bit of friction. Like you notice when I let go, it doesn't just keep spinning very long. It just stops. So I'm going to see if we can actually put a little silicone oil. This is, I believe, 60 weight silicone oil for RC cars. I'm going to put a little bit of this on the gears and see if it smooths things out. Let's put a little drop on each gear. Oh, wow. That immediately made a big difference. Just the feeling of it now. It spins so much smoother. Hey, lube it or lose it, right? The only other thing I'm going to try to lubricate is, you guys remember that little washer behind the fan? I'm going to put a drop on that too, just so that it has a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of lube on there. I'm going to work it down in there. So now the gears are lubed and the washer is lubed. Whoa. Watch. See how it keeps spinning now? Everything's well lubricated and working. So I'll make sure I go and add all these details on Kirby's design. If you guys want to go see his fan design and try to print this yourself, he actually has a link. It's in the video description. And you can go check it out and take a crack at it. But definitely, the silicone oil had a big impact. I think it combated a lot of the problems I had with getting a little glue on the gears. Now everything's moving really butter smooth. Well guys, I'm standing outside in my Bitcoin mine, so let's see if this cools things down. Alright, well that had no effect. Hey guys, I think I just found another use for this fan. Watch this. The air blowing through the Antminer is enough to turn the crank. So all I need to do is add a little DC motor and I got myself a generator. Yeah, run that Bitcoin equipment a lot cheaper. Yeah, but not really. Well guys, if you enjoy 3D printing and 3D modeling, but you just don't know where to get started or you want to learn more about it, head over to lynda.com/nerdgasm. Now they're a new sponsor to the channel and they're an amazing service. I've actually been using them for some time. And they offer online courses in the form of videos that are easy to follow on any topic, any software, ranging from beginner all the way up through expert. So if you want to learn how to code, they've got you covered. If you want to learn how to 3D print, they've got you covered. If you want to learn how to 3D model stuff to 3D print, they've also got you covered. Now, if you guys watched my Bitcoin mining video, I think it's the video I posted right before this one, I actually 3D printed a little hood for my 120mm cooling fan on my Bitcoin mining shed to keep the weather out. Now, I actually took the Lynda course, which, God, it didn't even seem like it was a half an hour, and I made it through the whole thing, and they showed me how to use a program called Tinkercad, which is free to use and is online, and I literally designed that entire thing in Tinkercad from that lesson, printed it out, took it out there, screwed it in the wall, and everything fit perfectly. So 3D modeling isn't as hard as a lot of people think, as long as you have the right instruction. Now guys, if you use lynda.com/nerdgasm, you get yourself a 10-day free trial, and it's risk-free. Go sign up for your 10 days, check it out. You can take any courses, even the one I recommended, which I will have a link in the video description, and go play around with Tinkercad and see what you come up with. It's actually a lot of fun. Or if you're more of an advanced kind of guy, go check out some of their courses on some of the other 3D modeling software. Alright guys, well I really hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a lot of fun making this, and a lot of frustration. I burned myself more than a couple of times, so I'm going to go update old Kirby on what he can do with his design here to make it a little better, hopefully. But guys, also, if you're interested in buying my shirt, I have a new short store opened up. It's got all kinds of funny shirts in it. It's shop.barnerd.com. Every purchase there helps the channel, and that's something that took me a while to get up and running, but I'm actually pretty proud of it. And these shirts, come on, they're funny. If you don't think this shirt's funny, then what are you doing here? Come on, seriously. Anyways, guys, I got to get going. I got more videos to shoot for you guys because you're over on Twitter telling me to make videos and stop talking on Twitter. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, guys, till next time.
Oh my god, I'm so cold! I'm so cold! I'm so...
Oops. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please take a moment and subscribe to my channel. It helps me a lot. Also, come over to Twitter. I'm at Barnacules. I'm a real social guy. Also, if you have a couple of minutes, check out some of these many other videos. I made them myself.